afternoon or evening. Um, Welcome to session 7, meditation 102. Let us set our intentions by saying the four immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Um, our producer, Nick Solidio, asked me to send thanks and gratitude to those of you who sent his family, who some of whom had been dealing with the COVID virus, and he wanted to thank you for your, excuse me, positive wishes and prayers and good vibes. And his family members are doing much better this week, so that's good. Let's jump right in. Let's do 11 minutes of meditation. You're all experts by now, so I'm not going to even go into the technique or the posture. I might guide it a little bit during the course of it, but you all should know what you're doing by now. So let's start. So what we're working with is mind looking at mind, right? So we're cultivating a sense of awareness that becomes aware of what we're thinking about. So by stilling the body and calming the mind, we're trying to create a sense of mindful awareness of how our thoughts come and go. And the visual metaphor we've been using is clear, unstained, limitless blue sky, and thoughts arising and dissipating, dissolving back into the sky, arising out of the sky, dissolving back into the sky, like a cloud. And how we're able to do that is just by recognizing the fact that we're thinking, not letting the thought pull us, but just becoming aware. And depending on where we are at in our practice and where we're at today, that can happen very quickly. It could take a while before we become aware that we're already engaged in a thought, taken by a thought. But that's okay. It's not about, it's not about how quickly you are able to become aware. It's just the effort you're making in developing that kind of awareness of how your mind works and how thoughts arise and dissolve. Don't judge the thought. Well, if we think of that clarity of mind as something very base level, it's really inherent to who we are, right? And something very positive, that clarity and stillness. Well, the thoughts that come out of it are of it. They're not apart from it, really. They arise and they dissipate back into it, dissolve back into it. So they are of the same nature, the nature of clarity. It's our relationship to it that colors it with something positive or negative, that almost imbues it with energy, but we don't have to. So thought can come up, you could recognize it and leave it where it is, rather than let it create emotion, which can spur you on to action. And if it does create emotion, we can treat emotion in the same way. We don't have to let the emotion consume us and spur us on to take action or to just dwell in the emotion. We can leave it where it is. But I'm making the connection between the thought and the mind. The thought comes out of the mind, and that clarity of mind, which we consider as calming and positive, the ultimate nature of the thought is that. So try to look at the thought with some of that almost kindness and almost confidence, not as something that's wrong or something that needs to be banished or something that you need to get rid of. It's just leaving it where it is. Okay. We spoke about adjusting the level of your gaze. If you find yourself getting groggy, spaced out, to raise the level, the angle of your gaze slightly, which can kind of wake you up a bit. And the opposite, if you find yourself really distracted or really busy, to lower it, can kind of calm that energy a bit. Subtle differences, but they can make it. They can make a difference. Great, excellent. I think it's important to look at that distinction that we were just talking about. We use the image of the sky. That's just an image. It's a metaphor, right? We're talking about the mind, consciousness, which really is unstained by our thoughts and emotions, right? They come and go within that clarity of consciousness. That clarity of consciousness, when left alone, has a natural peace to it, I think, is what we're finding when we meditate. And like I said, those thoughts arise out of that clarity. So even if the thought seems like something mundane or seems like something violent or negative or something, the actual essence of that thought is coming from that clarity of mind, that peaceful nature of consciousness. So maybe if we look at those thoughts without the judgments of, oh, I'm thinking it's bad for meditation, I'm failing at meditation, or I'm thinking about such a petty thing or about a negative thing or about a judgmental thing. If we don't go there and just recognize the thought as part of the nature of mind and leave it where it is there, I think that'll really help our meditation practice a lot. Because it's very easy for us to, myself, and I'm sure a lot of you, to have these negative, judgmental things about, failure, success. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it good? Or am I bad? Am I going to see results? Am I not going to see results? This constant judgment of quality and how we're doing. And in many ways, it doesn't really apply here. I mean, what does apply here is your intention, which we try to set at the beginning of class, and how you're dedicating the merit that you're creating in these things, and your efforts, your commitment and your diligence and staying with it. That's what really matters. I'm going to do a little reading from The Heart of Compassion by Garchen Rinpoche. We read from his book last week. That's the book, The Heart of Compassion. It's his commentary on the 37 verses on the practice of a bodhisattva by Gulchu Togme, which is those 37 practices of bodhisattva. My teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, it's really the heart teaching of Garchen Rinpoche. It's something that he emphasizes a lot. Those of you who weren't here last week, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was one of the great spiritual masters of the last century, one of the great Tibetan Buddhist masters. And there's a great documentary about him called Brilliant Moon. But I'm going to read verse 21. by Gulchu Togme goes like this. Sense pleasures and desirable things are like salt water. The more one tastes them, the more one's thirst increases. To abandon promptly all objects which arouse attachment is the practice of a bodhisattva. So Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche comments on that verse. Whatever comfort, wealth, beauty, and power you enjoy today is the result of some minor good actions in a past life. However much of them you have, it is the characteristic of ordinary people never to feel satisfied. You may have more wealth than you actually need. You may have triumphed over many opponents. You may have close relationships with friends and relatives, but it is never enough. Even if gold coins were to rain down on you from the sky, it would probably not be enough. When craving for all sorts of desirable things becomes so ingrained in your mind, trying to satisfy your wants is like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the more thirsty you feel. Looking at life in the great cities of ancient and modern times, you can see how people feverishly accumulate ever-increasing amounts of wealth, but still die without having satisfied their craving. As Lord Atisha said, abandon desire for everything and stay without desire. Desire does not bring happiness. It cuts off liberation's very life. To know how to be satisfied with what you have is to possess true wealth. I'll read that again. To know how to be satisfied with what you have is to possess true wealth. The great saints and hermits of the past had the ability to be content with whatever they had and with however they lived. They stayed in lonely places, sheltering in caves, sustaining their lives with the barest of necessities. When you know how to judge what is enough for you, you will no longer be tormented by wants, desires, and needs. Otherwise, as the saying goes, craving is like a dog. The more it gets, the more it wants. The followers of the Buddha possessed only their Dharma robes and a begging bowl. They spent their lives absorbed in deep concentration. That was how they freed themselves from samsara. They did not hanker after wealth, fame, or position, which they saw as utterly meaningless and left behind without a second thought, like spittle in the dust. Nowadays, people get chased busily after externals and are preoccupied by what they can get. As a result, learning, reflecting, and meditating have declined, and with them, Buddha's teachings themselves. Learning, reflecting, and meditating are, in fact, the only things of which you can never have enough. Not even the most learned sages ever thought they had reached the ultimate extent of learning. They were aware that there was still an ocean of knowledge to acquire. Be satisfied, therefore, with whatever you have by way of ordinary things, but never satisfied with the Dharma. If your ordinary desires and dislikes are insatiable, on the other hand, and you have no wish for the Dharma, you can only sink lower and lower. So, how are we supposed to hear that? We're not going to, some of us may put on robes and, become monks and wandering, with begging bowls and things like that, as was tradition and is tradition in some parts of the world. But most of us are not. Most of us are involved in life and have families and jobs and friends and commitments and things, and that's okay. But what he is talking about is having, that the grasping towards externals, often can replace our pursuit for, spiritual growth, when we can get lost in that kind of thing. Which brings us to a topic I wanted to get into is ego, because ego in the West, you talk about, people having a healthy ego and that, ego is looked at often in a positive light and a negative light when it becomes you become too self-centered. But ego is the mechanism by which we try to often accumulate things that are beneficial for us. And that can get in the way of spiritual progress, because when we talk about the first two noble truths of the Buddha in life, there's suffering. The reason why there's suffering, because we don't understand the true nature of our reality, which is that we're not, on an ultimate level, we're not separate beings. We don't just exist as individuals. There's a much higher interconnectedness and interdependence that is at play. And the ego can interfere with that. And ego is very subtle because ego can use a lot of things, and very obvious things, right? You want prestige, you want power, you want wealth, you want fame, you want glory, you want credentials, you want respect. And anything can be used by the ego, including spirituality and spiritual pursuits. There's a very good book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which I encourage. I think we've read from that. I encourage all of you to read from that, to read that book, because it is really good. And talking about ego, the development of mindfulness is particularly constructive when you're looking at why you're doing certain things. Okay. For instance, me personally, I'm someone that's pursued very worldly things involving fame and notoriety. Those things are very much tied with ego. And doing something like this, teaching a class, right, that is of spiritual nature, I have to look at why I'm doing it. Am I doing this because I like the credentials of being some kind of Buddhist teacher? Although I always say I'm not teaching, I'm just kind of parroting what I've learned and trying to communicate that to you guys. But you know, there is an element of that. I have to look at that. I have to be honest with myself. Well, how much of me likes being in this position as this guy that is teaching spirituality and teaching Buddhism? How much of my ego is inflated by that or flattered by that? And I'm sure that is part of it. You know, I'm sure that's at play, and that is part of it there. And I have to look at that. But at the same time, I know that you people who come to this get some benefit out of this, and that's why you're here. So maybe that's much more important than whatever negativity that I'm, you know, engaged in on some level. But the point I'm making, and the importance is, we have to almost hold up a mirror to our mind and look at what our mind is doing. I think we've gone our lives just kind of being pulled by the mind, trusting that the ego is of benefit to us. What the ego desire is bring. If the ego desires more money or better job or better credentials or better standing or better, you know, respect and stuff, that's noble, that's good, that's positive, that's beneficial. And in some ways it is. You know, you want a good job, you want to do, you know, you want to be fulfilled in what you do, and I understand that. But when it's at the expense of others, because that kind of pursuit and that kind of ego can also be about vanquishing the opponent or the rival, or, you know, one-upmanship, being better. So the point I'm trying to get at is that this mindfulness that we're cultivating should also be used for looking at the mind and looking at the choices we're making, the desires that pull us and push us, the things that we pursue. So we can have some clarity as to what exactly we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes they're double-edged things, you know, like I just said about what I'm doing here. You know, is this kind of flattering my ego and giving me these credentials as this, you know, someone who's not just an actor, but someone who teaches Buddhism. But, you know, I mean, Buddhism is something that's been, has enriched my life a lot. And people ask for this kind of teaching. So if I'm able to do it, but I have to be careful, and we all do. We have to be careful with how our mind works, because it's been conditioned to work in a certain way for our whole lives. And if you believe in reincarnation, as Buddhists do, for many, many lives. I hope this is making sense. I'll give you a very, very mundane example of this. For many years, in my 20s, I was, besides pursuing acting, I was trying to write, you know, and I had all these writings for 10 years, you know, plays that were half done and screenplays and fiction. None of it was any good. None of it was finished. And I used to move every year. And every year this stack would get bigger and I would move. When I'd move, I'd take this stack of writing with me. You know, I was very attached to it. And after a while, one day I just said, you know, this stack was big. This is all junk. This is all garbage because you're in love with the idea of writing. You're in love with the idea of being a writer rather than having something to say that might be of some kind of interest or benefit even maybe to other people. And I threw everything away. This stuff that I had been carrying around for years. And somehow that kind of unlocked and liberated something. And then I went on to do something, you know, that came to fruition, a piece of writing, really because I figured out what I wanted to say and that there was something valid in that. But it was only after really looking at myself and questioning why I was doing this. We could do the same thing with spirituality. We could do the same thing with Buddhism, you know. Spiritual materialism is using this spiritual quest and the spiritual, you know, saying you're a Buddhist, wearing the beads and whatever you're doing. And you can use that as another thing to ornament the ego. You know what I mean? Let's open this up for some questions. A bit long-winded today. Huh? I have been reading How to Practice Shamatha Meditation by Lam Rinpoche, translated by Alan Wallace. Do you practice any visualization? I actually know Alan Wallace. He's a friend of mine. He lives in the same town that I do. Do I practice visualization? Well, I mean, the thing about the thoughts and the mind and the clouds and the sky is a visualization. So if you do that, you practice visualization. There are visualization techniques that I do. They're not really techniques, they're practices. They're specific Buddhist practices, but they have to be given to you, at least in what I do, by a teacher. So I can't really go into that in detail because those are things that a teacher has to give you. So I wouldn't recommend any of that beyond what we're already doing, visualizing, right? Can you please restate the documentary? Oh, it's called Brilliant Moon, The Life of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Sharon asked, do you think it's mindfulness, diligence that keeps self-confidence from turning into too much ego? Mindfulness, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, is looking at the mind and looking at it from a very calm, mindful place to see what exactly are our intentions here. You know, and being able to discern whether you're coming from a place that's just purely ego driven or a place that's purely altruistic or a combination of both, a tainted version of altruism that has a tainted ego. That kind of discernment is actually wisdom. To be able to discern whether which one is which, and how much is ego and how much is altruistic, and is there altruism here, and is there not, or am I just fooling myself? You know, being able to discern those things is wisdom. And wisdom can arise when we start to cultivate mindfulness. Wisdom can arise through the practice of meditation, through shamatha meditation, through the calm abiding meditation, which we're practicing. And, you know, there is an energy of wisdom that can arise through this practice. Are you able to meditate anywhere? Do you need your designated place? Designated place can help to inspire you and make it a habitual thing, right? So if you know the place in your house, you have the cushion, you have a little, you see, we have a little shrine here, a small one, so that these things inspire you, and you know that that's your place and that's going to center you, and you look forward to being there. But sometimes you travel, sometimes you don't have that space. I bring a little portable shrine, which is basically just pictures and a little, cloth. And in hotel rooms, I do that all over the world. I go into a hotel room and I start moving chairs and moving stools and creating a little makeshift shrine, because I like seeing the images. I like knowing that they're there, and it inspires me to sit, because I like creating that space. But if you don't have the luxury of doing that, then you should do it anywhere. And we've said this before, but really, the whole goal of meditation is to be able to bring this mindful awareness into daily life, interacting with other people, online at the Department of Motor Vehicles, in the supermarket, on the street, on the subway, when people are in your face and annoying you and doing, that's really why we're not practicing to live on a cushion. We're practicing to live in the world, really. Autumn says, hi from NOLA, one of my favorite places in the world, New Orleans. In regard to meditation and Buddhism, is it more helpful to sit with your negative thoughts rather than ignore them? Is constant positivity and optimism really possible? How can you be compassionate to yourself when dealing with anxiety, depression, and therefore negative energy? Is it more helpful to sit with your negative thoughts rather than ignore them? By sit with the negative thoughts. So if we're talking about meditation and a negative thought comes, what we try to do is recognize that negative thought and leave it where it is. So in a sense, you are just sitting with it rather than ignore them, which means push it away. Oh, here's that negative thought. I'm not going to go there. It's almost like you're just recognizing that quality. And then go back to the breath. Now, that's the important thing, is that we're learning a technique dealing with posture, with breath, with the gaze, and working with the thoughts. So it's not just a matter of leaving the thought where it is. You have a technique to go back to the breath to anchor you in something else. Is constant positivity and optimism really possible? Well, ultimately, I guess that's enlightenment, right? And you become a Buddha, and then you're just, all your actions and actions of body, speech, and mind become a benefit to all beings. But I don't think any of us today are there yet. How can you be compassionate to yourself when dealing with anxiety or depression and therefore negative energy? Well, it's like what I was talking about before. If we're looking at the mind as this place of natural great peace and clarity, and accepting that as our true nature, right? And these thoughts and these emotions that come through are just like storms pass. You don't say, when you see a cloud in the sky, you don't look at the cloud and say, that's the sky. You say, that's a cloud. And you know that that's not going to be there in a few hours or in an hour or tomorrow. But you know the sky is going to be there. So it's a way of relating to ourselves, not relating to our thoughts as if our thoughts are us, or our depression is us, or our anxiety is us. No, those are emotions. Those are states that will rise and fall from the mind. It's more of starting to relate to yourself as someone with the potential of enlightenment, because the Buddhists believe that we have Buddha nature. All sentient beings have Buddha nature within us. And it's just the fact that we have not realized that fact. We have not realized the true nature of reality about interdependence and interconnectedness, and that we don't just exist as this inherent self that we've kind of compiled and created since we're born through being given a name and being taught things and having memories, and we hold on to and perceive the self as something that's exists on its own. And the ultimate reality is that that's not the case. If you existed totally on your own, you'd die very quickly, right? Because everything, you're dependent on a lot of things. You wouldn't have made it past, being a baby, because you were dependent on your parents, who were dependent on each other, who were dependent on a job to give them money so they could buy food, which was dependent on farmers and people who, picked the vegetables and packed it and shipped it and cooked it and sold it. There's interdependence in pretty much everything. Do you agree that your ego sometimes prevents you from being open to others and their feelings? Yes, 100%. Do you think I can reach my goal when all I can do is thinking positive thoughts? Yeah, I mean, you can become enlightened, sure. That's something the Buddha, in the Four Noble Truths, the third noble truth is the truth, the truth of the path, that there is a way of becoming enlightened. And that's why we're practicing Buddhism or meditation. Both. Anyone can become enlightened. Some people can become enlightened in one life. Some people, it's going to take several lifetimes. But, the more you commit to this path, the better chances you have. Do you feel it more beneficial to cultivate mindfulness outside of meditation? Not necessarily more or less. It's both, I think. This is a very good question. Emma says, how do you learn to distinguish between when you're recognizing and sitting with a thought or emotion and when you're pushing it away or suppressing it? Sometimes when I intend to meditate, I feel like I end up kind of disassociating, like I use it to avoid or push away things that need my attention. Well, the phrase here, sometimes when I intend to meditate. So the actual formal practice of sitting meditation, that's in intention to meditate. Like, let's look at it as that. So if you sit down and your practice is meditation and you feel like you end up kind of dissociating, avoiding or pushing away things that need your attention, those things are at odds, it seems to me. So if things need your attention, you should go and do them. Now, I don't know if that means pay a bill, if that means to call your mom, if that means to, you know what I mean, walk the dog, make a decision about breaking up with someone. Those are real things that certainly need attention and need, decisions. But that's not, I don't practice meditation to do that. I don't say, you know what, I really have to figure out whether or not I'm going to take this job. I'm going to sit and meditate about it. That's not what I do. I meditate like we do here, using that practice of mindfulness, and working with thoughts. You say disassociating, avoiding, or pushing away things that need my attention. We're not avoiding or pushing away our thoughts that arise. We're just leaving them where they are and going back to the breath, finding a way to work with the thoughts. So they're almost two separate things. I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure if it is. Josh says, what is evolution to you? Spiritual evolution is a path, is spiritual path is Buddhism, and evolving along that, which ultimately means becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha, which, I probably will not reach in many lifetimes, but maybe not. I don't know, or any of us. Maybe some of us will, reach that in this lifetime. Maybe it'll take 100 lives. Who knows? But that's evolution. All right. Let us do 11 minutes of meditation again. remember, you really, the focus is on the breath. The breath is our anchor. So focus on the place between the nostrils and the upper lip. We're breathing through our nose only, unless you can't and have to do it through your mouth. So when you recognize your thinking, you go back to the breath as your anchor to the practice, rather than getting lost in the thought, pushing away the thought, judging the thought. Just see that you're thinking, go back to the breath. So you're shifting your attention consciously, rather than the unconscious following, being pulled into the movie of our thoughts. And let's stop labeling thoughts. Let's not label them as bad, as good, as shallow, as lofty. If you're going to label them as anything, label them as mind. Go back to the breath. Mind looking at mind, mind arising out of mind, mind dissolving back into mind. Go back to the breath. My teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, said recently, Buddha is not the name of a man, it's the name of mind. So that clarity of mind, that clear, unstained, limitless sky is Buddha. And that is within us and accessible. And accessible, not inaccessible. It is accessible. Back to the breath. Remember, I post a lot of stuff on Instagram on my stories, quotes from teachers living and some who have passed. I encourage you to look into those teachers and find a teacher, if you can, that you can study with when things open up and you can be in person, or you can do online teachings. There's a lot of teachers doing stuff live online, similar to this, and books. You know, we recommend books here, and we talk about, masters who've written books, and look into their things, look into their books, get their books, read their books. There's one thing I saw. Oh, here. This is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. You have to recognize your attitudes of psychological and spiritual materialism, and both of those have to be cut through. If you have too much desire to gain a higher goal using your own authority, you are still standing on ego's territory. You are still trying to become a better person, so you still have the tendency for enlightened ego, or egohood, which is the same as being an egomaniac. The tendency for enlightened ego is the desire for ego to become indestructible, which is spiritual materialism. So sooner or later, you have to let go of this desire to constantly become a better person from ego's point of view. That's a good distinction, from ego's point of view rather than from a Buddhist point of view. Okay, we'll do a couple more questions, then we will wrap it up for today. I seem to have some of my clearest moments of clarity during these sessions, almost eureka moments, from everything to my relationships with people to my outlook on life. How do you juggle logging those thoughts while staying in the practice? Just that, juggle them and log them. If something comes into your mind that's you find really fruitful, yeah, log it, remember it, and then go back to the practice. Like I said, there's, there is wisdom that can arise through meditation. There's a clarity that can come through meditation. It's not necessarily why we do it. We do it to bring benefit to all beings, right? Primarily. But as a byproduct, yeah, why not? You should log these things and remember them if they're. How will you know when you reach enlightenment? Ask someone who's enlightened. I will. I don't know. I think it's something you it's like being in love. You don't have to, it just, probably because there's no more suffering. But enlightenment's the end of suffering, as a being. That's how you know, when all suffering has ceased permanently. Does Buddhism frown upon using something like magic mushrooms to lose your ego? Buddhism is not something that per se has this one doctrine that everybody follows. There's some Buddhist sect, and some of it has cultural, are come from cultural things. Some Buddhists are vegetarian, some are not. Most Tibetan Buddhists that from Tibet actually, are not vegetarian. So there's some Tibetan Buddhists drink wine. Some Tibetan Buddhist lamas drink wine. Monks don't drink wine. There's different vows that that are taken by monks. Some are celibate, some are not. These are lamas I'm talking about, teachers, let alone lay people. So I don't think there's not like one law written like thou shalt not do, anything intoxicating. But specific teachers may have certain expectations from their students that they prefer. My teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, asks his students not to use any intoxicants. And that's just, I think, from his, what he feels is effective, or what he feels helps, the student, or what he feels is necessary for the student to make progress along the path, and using the methods that he teaches. But it certainly doesn't. I would say it's not recommended. Even if it's not shunned, it's not it's not like this is something to do. I don't really know. I don't have a lot of experience with those things, so. I think the best thing to do would be to, when you find a teacher and you're really, making a commitment to a teacher, bring it up and see what they feel about it. Can anyone be truly be enlightened until all people are enlightened? Yes, they can. They can be enlightened. But you stay, the bodhisattva vow is that you will, even if you do become enlightened, you will continually try to be of benefit to other beings until all people are enlightened. The Buddha was truly enlightened, and he lived 2,500 years ago. And his teachings remain so that other people can become enlightened. Okay, let us dedicate the merit of our practice today by saying our closing prayer. Again, I encourage you to look into the masters and the teachers that I recommend, the books and the postings, and also, things that you find on your own that you find of interest. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you for being here today. We'll see you next week. We're going to continue with Meditation 102. Meditation 101 was 7 classes of basic meditation instruction and practice, and it was not really rooted in anything Buddhist or Dharma. And 102 came out of that because a lot of people were interested in Dharma and Buddhism. And now that we're into 102, which is meditation instruction and practice, and also Buddhadharma, I don't really see, as of yet, what we'd move on to, what 103 would be. So we're going to stay in 102 for now. See you later.